welcome to the January 2026 Q&A on moving to France. My name is Allison Grant Lounes. I am the owner of the relocation agency Your Transformation, and we help people to get the right visa and do the right French admin to follow their dream of living in France. I'm also the admin of the Americans in France Facebook group, which has about 25,000 people in it. And I am the author of Foolproof French Visas, and I am happy to announce that the complete 2026 edition was released today and is now available on Amazon. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the changes that have come up this year and some of what you can expect in terms of visa applications going forward, what some of the changes in the 2026 edition were, and of course, I'm going to give you the link so that you can go ahead and check it out and get the most up-to-date version. So before we get started, I want to talk about some of the major changes. We're going to talk a little bit about things that are updated in Foolproof French Visas and a couple of things that you might be hearing about if you're following the Facebook groups, the social media, a little bit of the French news. There are a lot of things that are a little bit up in the air and changes that are going to be going into effect in the coming year, whether you're already in France or whether you are going to be moving sometime in the year or two to come. I do want to talk about visa stuff. First, I want to talk about the new rules for residency that have gone into effect as of January 1st. So you may have heard that there is now a language exam and a civics exam that are going to be required for getting a multi-year, 10-year card or applying for naturalization. So up until December 31st, if you submitted an application for naturalization, you had to have a B1 level of French, which is low intermediate. And our friends Mr. Clooney and his lovely wife Amal probably have approximately a B1 level of French. There's been a little bit of indignation in the news about whether or not they really met the requirements. And even though I haven't heard him speak French, B1 is not that high of a level. I'm sure that even if his French is not excellent, I'm sure that he could probably pass a B1. I don't think that there are major concerns there. However, as of January 1st, the level is going up to B2, which is a little bit more substantial. It's a high intermediate. It requires a pretty high level of functioning in French. And the way that you're going to have to prove this language level is through one of two exams. There's the exam, the TCF, the Test des Connaissances Clés, which basically grades you on all of the different areas of language learning. So speaking, reading comprehension, grammar, writing, listening comprehension. And it grades you individually on each of those skills, and it gives you an average. So you could be high A2 in speaking and low C1 in grammar and B2 in reading comprehension and have it all average out to a B2. On the other hand, the DELF, which is actually 6 different exams. There's the DILF, the Diplôme Initial en Langue Française, the DELF, the Diplôme d'études en langue française, and the DELF with an A, Diplôme Approfondi en Langue Française. And there's one test for each level. So A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2. Now, when you pass the TCF, the results are valid for 2 years. When you pass the DELF, it is considered a diploma and the results are valid for life. So your best bet for residency, multi-year card, naturalization, all of that is to pass the DELF B2. Obviously, if you pass the B1 for the 10-year or the A2 for a multi-year card, then you'll have to take the subsequent exams before you can move on to the next level, I guess, of being French. So those are the new requirements that have gone into effect this year. Now, there's also the new civics test, which was only announced in mid-October of 2025. It was Bruno Retailleau, the outgoing Minister of the Interior's parting gift to foreigners in France, in that now everyone has to take a 40-question multiple-choice civics test on 5 different areas with topics ranging from French Republican values to history and culture to living in French society and various things like that. Now, the questions, it's going to be 40 questions, multiple choice, with the questions divided up pretty evenly among those areas. There is a different test for each different type of residence. So again, there's a test for the multi-year residence permit, a test for the 10-year residence card, and a separate test for naturalization. Now, the questions do increase in difficulty. It's also the vocabulary that increases in difficulty because obviously when you naturalize, you're expected to have a B2 level of French and you can have more complex questions than if you are going for the multi-year card and you only need an A2 level. Now, I'm going to do a separate information session probably later this month on the civics test. We have our first clients who are taking it during the month of January who are hoping to get multi-year cards because they meet all of the other requirements. So we're going to have an information session on it later. Is there an exemption for people over 65? So for the language test, there is an exemption. If you're over 65, you do not have to take the language test for a multi-year card or a 10-year residence card. You do still have to have a B2 level of French and a language test in order to naturalize. For the civics test, it's a little bit up in the air, and I've seen different reports. My initial understanding was that you were not exempt from the civics test if you were over 65. However, I've seen a couple different sources say that you are. So I'm a little bit unclear on that. I haven't seen the information on the official website. You know what? We can check again right now, and I'll give you the link to the test center site in the chat. So again, this doesn't say actually on here. It just says anyone who's asking for a multi-year or resident carte de séjour has to pass the civics test. And it doesn't say anything about exemption. So I will read further. I've seen some places saying that yes, you're exempt, but nothing that I have read from an official source so far has said that you're exempt over 65. All right, let me see if I can change the volume. Oh, is that better? Okay. So for the civics test, and again, we'll go into more detail in this at a later session that I will announce by email, but this is the website where you can find a test center near you. So these are going to be given on tablets and you register through a training center. So this will be different private companies that offer other kinds of exams. A lot of times it's like different types of professional training or tests that you might have to have for different kinds of degrees or diplomas or things like that. Continuing education centers, if you will. So this map is where you can find a center, and most of the time you're going to have to contact them directly to enroll. Now let's talk for a minute too about visitors, because visitors, you're going to be exempt from this, and the reason is that you're not really eligible for a multi-year card, a 10-year card, or naturalization. And it's been a little bit ambiguous up until this point. In every single edition of Foolproof French Visas, since the first edition came out in 2019, I have always maintained that it is quite difficult and it is not a good idea to go on a visitor visa if your plan is ultimately to get a long-term residence card or naturalized. Now, there are a couple of reasons for this. One is that typically you're not paying much of anything into the French system in the way of taxes. A visitor is considered a temporary status. It's a 1-year temporary carte de séjour that you can renew every year. Now, there's no particular reason why after 5 years they should suddenly want to give you a different status that would, if you were on a 10-year resident card, for example, you would be able to work or you would be able to be eligible for certain benefits for being low income. And so, as a visitor, you're supposed to be able to support yourself. You're not going to be eligible for any of those benefits. There's no reason why you would suddenly get a status enabling you to work. And so typically you're not going to be randomly given this other status. Now, there has been anecdotal evidence of people in certain prefectures who have gotten a multi-year or a 10-year card after 5 years living in France. It is very much marginal. We know of one couple, it's a mother and daughter couple who moved to France, and they were expecting that after 5 years of supporting themselves that they would be able to get the 10-year residence card. And what happened was the mother was of retirement age and receiving her pension. And so she had financial resources to support herself and her daughter, which she was doing. And then the daughter was probably my age, maybe a little bit younger, was expecting to hang out in France for 5 years and then being supported by her mother and then be able to work at the end of those 5 years. She didn't have any of her own financial resources. She was being supported by her mother, wasn't filing taxes, and just hanging out in France for 5 years isn't really enough to justify a change of status. And so at renewal time, eventually the mother got a 10-year card and the daughter was kept on a 1-year temporary card. Now, another change going forward that was also part of the 2024 immigration law is the fact that for certain visa types, renewals will be limited. And so you'll have a maximum of 3 renewals to get to the point where you are basically required to qualify for a multi-year card or change your status to something else. So visitor visas are exempt from that. Students, if you're working on your studies and you're continuing in the same education pathway, you're also exempt from that. But if you're a family member of a French citizen, if you're on a profession libérale, a salarié, a regular entrepreneur visa, anything that's not talent passport, you theoretically get 3 renewals and then you have to meet the requirements for the multi-year card. So we go into detail in the 2026 edition of Foolproof French Visas into how that works, which visa types are subject to the restriction of 3 renewals and which ones are not. But a visitor visa or a visitor carte de séjour status, there's no particular restriction on the number of renewals that you can have. So you can renew it pretty much indefinitely as long as you continue to meet the criteria. The renewal process is done online, so then you only have to go to the prefecture to pick up your new card. So it's not terribly burdensome. And of course, part of that is that they want to see that you are continuing to meet the actual criteria of residing in France. Unfortunately, I've been seeing a lot more of people who have gotten a visitor visa, who keep renewing it, but who are not actually living in France. They don't have a French bank account. They're not on the French healthcare system, all kinds of things. And so it's becoming increasingly difficult to demonstrate ongoing residence in France. Now, it's important to know too that if you are on a talent passport, typically, even if you're issued a 1-year card, you're going to be issued a 1-year carte pluriannuelle. And so you're going to be exempt from some of these requirements for renewing your multi-year card. For example, we've helped a lot of people with the business creator entrepreneur, talent passport, visa, and carte de séjour. For those people, they can get 1 to 4 years on their initial card, but it's always considered a carte pluriannuelle, even if it's fractioned out into individual years. And so if you're already on a carte pluriannuelle and not a carte temporaire, then you don't have to take the civics test or meet the language requirements to renew that card, only to pass to the next level. Do you need to file taxes in France if you're there on a visitor visa? Yes. When you move to France on a visitor visa, you become a French tax resident from the day you arrive to reside. And it's the tax treaty that determines where you pay your taxes and on what income. So those are just some of the changes that are going into effect within the next year. The 2 things that we did not talk about in the book that may come into effect, in which case we will update the text of the book and make sure it's important for you to review Foolproof French Visas to get the digital copy, because once you are in our website and you have access to the digital copy, then when we do need to make an update, which I'm sure we're going to have to do during the course of this year, then you'll be able to get that update quickly. So there are 2 things. That one is in the new budget that they are working on. I'm actually not sure if it's passed yet. The fees for the carte de séjour may be increasing. So right now it's 200 euros for a validation. It's 25 euros for the droit du timbre. For most carte de séjour renewals, it's 225 euros. It's also 180 euros if you file your renewal late and you need to pay a late fee. There was talk about increasing these by about 50 to 100 euros. So those fees may go up, and I'm not sure at what stage that's going to happen. A lot of times the proposals and the decrees, or the proposals that are passed into law, are not implemented until they are issued as decrees, which can take months or years. So this past spring, we had, for example, all business plans, and we're going to talk about this because it was a question that came up in the questions that you submitted. The business plans now need to be approved by the DRITS for profession libérale visas in order to apply to be self-employed in France. Now, that was a change that happened in a law in about 2021, and it was implemented by decree in June. It was implemented in practice in December. So things take quite a long time to trickle down. The other thing that eventually we'll want to discuss is that part of the new budget also was the idea that People on visitor visas would be paying to access the French healthcare system. Now, technically, people who are on visitor visas are already subject to the PUMA contribution, which is not a tax, it's an insurance premium. Somebody asked a question about whether it is eligible for a tax credit on your US taxes. The answer is no, because it's not a tax. It's a health insurance premium to pay for universal healthcare in France. It is not optional. Theoretically, people on visitor visas will pay the PUMA contribution, 6.5% of passive income over 23,000 euros. Now, what actually happens is that pension income is excluded from the PUMA calculation. So if you are only receiving Social Security, 401k contribution, 401k distributions, anything like, unless you also have a high amount of passive income, like from rental income, taxable dividends, taxable interest, things like that, then you are not going to be typically subject to the PUMA contribution. So there may be, we're not sure how they're going to revise this situation. It's only specified that it will be decided by decree at a later date. So it's unclear, are they going to change the way that they calculate the PUMA contribution? Are they going to have an additional payment in order to submit your initial registration to the French healthcare system, et cetera, et cetera. So things to keep an eye on. I will, of course, be updating you when we have these Q&A sessions. So if you purchased the digital edition, so you have access through our website, I updated today with the 2026 edition, so you should be able to download. If you purchased a paperback, then you can get access for free to the 2026 edition by leaving a review and sending it to us. So you want to leave your review on the most recent edition. That will help it to become more visible to other people who might be interested in buying it. And send us your review and we'll give you access to the digital version, and that means that you'll get the updates for free. Okay, so in terms of what we added, I'm going to do a couple more minutes on the changes to the visa situation, and then we're going to jump into your questions, which there was a lot of them, so we might not get through everything today. I do want to go over very quickly what the additions were to this edition of Foolproof French Visas. So we added a bunch of new sections, and we started off with adding, what does it mean to have a visa to live in France? And I just saw in the comments somebody said, well, if you have a visitor visa but you don't live more than 6 months in France, then you don't have to file taxes. Well, yes, but then you can't renew your visitor visa because you don't actually reside in France. So it's a really important to know, and it's more important than ever, that if you're getting a visa to move to France, it is not so that you have the option of spending more than 90 days out of 180 days. The goal of having a visa is that you are coming to France to reside, you are establishing residence here, and if you want to continue to renew your visa, then you have to be living here, be on the French healthcare system, opening a French bank account, and doing all kinds of other things to establish residence and show that you live in France. So a lot of people have been flying under the radar. People have been signing up for the French healthcare system, but spending 5 months a year in France. That's not going to fly anymore. They have caught on. People who have been working remotely on visitor visas, that's another thing where the prefectures have caught on. If you're under retirement age, they are looking very closely at your income to see that you are not working in France when you came on a visitor visa that does not allow you to work. There's a section on the French language requirements. We added a section of will you be a tax resident of France? And so that also talks about some of these issues where people have been trying to choose their location of tax residence, which does not really fly. When you need to file a tax declaration and what types of income are going to be subject to tax. There are 2 new visa types that are covered in the book. There's the brand new talent card for medical and pharmacy professions. Probably not going to apply for most people, but I wanted to include it so that it would be a very complete addition. We do have one client who managed to get authorization to work as a physician in France, so we're going to be helping her change her status to that. There's also the talent card for a corporate officer, something called a mandataire social. And so if you're the director of a foreign national company and you have a salary of about over 60,000 euros-ish per year, then you can get a carte de séjour to exercise that salaried employment as the director of a foreign company. Now, the thing that I want to say about that, and this kind of broadly applies to all of the visa categories, is that the visa types are very specific in terms of what you're allowed to do, what salary you're allowed to, or you're required to have. what type of company you're working for and what your role is going to be. So if you're a salaried employee and you have a low salary versus having a master's and a little bit of a higher salary versus being the director of a company versus being self-employed, like all of those have very specific visa types. And this is why I find it really interesting when people will say it's okay to work remotely on a visitor visa, because the visa types for working for a foreign company in France exist. So if you're working for a foreign company, you need to have one of the visa types that like exists for the purpose of enabling you to work in France as the employee of a foreign company. So we don't have to get into that, but I just want to point out that there are about 29 different ways to move to France. Pretty much everything is covered. We have minor children's visas and residence permits. We group that into its own section. We did do a section on Brexit and the withdrawal agreement residence permits and those renewals. We talk about the renewal limitations, the renewal delays and expired documents, all of this scrutiny that is now being applied to visa renewals to show that you've been declaring your income, you've been integrating into French society, you've been signing up for the healthcare system, opening your French bank account, all of those things that are going to be required, all of the things that those prefectures are looking at really closely. And then, of course, a separate section for requesting a multi-year card versus requesting a 10-year card. SMEEK, the French minimum wage, has gone up. It was 1,801 euro and 80 cents per month. Now it's 1,823 euros per month. So we actually finished it at the end of December or the beginning of December before they announced all of those SMEEK updates. But it did go up to the amount that we expected. So those amounts are throughout the book. We updated all of the fees, all of the salaries for all of the different visa types have now been updated, etc. And so in the first couple pages of the edition, there's a section that outlines all of the changes that were made throughout the book compared to the previous edition, so you can take a look at that. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into the questions. We'll go through as many of them as we can, but I do want to give you the link to check out the next edition of Foolproof French Visas. You'll have the link to purchase the paperback and the ebook edition, depending on what is a better fit. Okay, so someone didn't put their name. I would like a retirement visa to stay in France. Okay, so the visa type you're going to be looking at is the visitor visa. That's all the information that's in the question. So you're going to want to take a look at Foolproof French Visas and read the section on the long stay visitor visa versus the temporary stay non-renewable visa type to see which one is a better fit for your situation. Fran, the pros and cons of keeping a home in the US as well as France. So that's where you're going to look at what the tax implications would be on whether or not you keep your home, how long you might want to keep it for, when you might want to sell it, how much capital gains you might want to get. Are you going to have any rental income while you are living in France? And if so, how might your taxes be affected by that? And for those types of questions, you're going to want to talk to an accountant. There's also different non-working residency visas. And so again, these are going to be the long stay visitor visa, so the long séjour temporaire visiteur. Then there's also the non-renewable visitor visa if you just want to stay for like 6 or 7 months and then you want to go back and you want to keep your primary residence outside of France, then the non-renewable visa type can be a good option. I do want to say just briefly, since I mentioned the visitor visa, a lot of times you'll see on the internet people on social media groups saying, I'm applying for a VLSTS. And usually what they mean is they're applying for a long stay visitor visa that does not enable them to work. VLSTS actually refers to about a dozen different visa types, each of which has their own section in Foolproof French visas, and each of which has a different function in terms of what it's going to enable you to do. So there's the VLSTS for salaried workers. The Profession Libérale is going to be a VLSTS. The spouse of a French family member is going to be a VLSTS. All that means is that it's a visa that you validate upon arrival, and validating your visa turns it into your first titre de séjour. And you don't get a physical plastic card in your first year, you'll get a physical plastic card when you go to renew. Okay, there's a question about the French language test, which we talked about. My wife has considerable savings plus revenue generated from those savings. If we have a will that leaves those savings to a US-based nonprofit, can French tax laws supersede our will? And if we move to and subsequently pass away in France? So it depends on whether or not you're considered a French tax resident. It depends on how long you're living in France before that happens. What you're going to want to do is talk to an international estate planner about the specifics of your situation and how you might want to organize your affairs before becoming a French tax resident in order to ensure that, to the extent possible, your wishes are respected. In a few minutes after a few questions, I will put a link in the chat to get some referrals from us. We have a tax attorney who works with many of our clients who can answer some of those questions and help you to understand the implications of when exactly you might become a tax resident after you move and how that might be advantageous or disadvantageous to you. Marie, I've been hearing and reading that several of the places I'm thinking of moving to are having less availability for expats to get living accommodations. Strasbourg, Annecy, Dijon, etc. Even just searching online for apartments has been challenging. So the main thing that you want to keep in mind when you're moving to France, and you go on to say that, you're a French national, but you're waiting for your ID card before you move back. The thing is that anybody with foreign income in France is going to have a difficult time. French agencies, French landlords are going to want to see a French work contract with pay slips with multiple years of tax declarations. Please don't share links to people that I don't know who they are and if they're legit. We have our legit people that we can introduce you to, but there's a lot of people out there, unfortunately, who are not legit. And so if I don't know who is being referred, please don't. I actually think the guy that you just linked to, if I'm right about who it is, I think that person is okay, but I don't have time to evaluate as I'm answering the questions. Where was I? So it's a universal problem in any French city. One, it's hard to find an apartment. Two, it's really hard to get your file accepted. We don't do real estate ourselves. We have a couple of partners that we work with, depending on the city, where we can introduce you to people who work specifically with foreigners who can advise on putting together the file correctly. They'll help you get set up with a guarantee so that basically instead of the agency selling insurance to the landlord, you're paying for a private insurance policy through something like Smart Garant or Garant Me, which then insures the landlord if you don't pay your rent. They are much more willing to accept foreign income, especially if it's something like a pension, than a private landlord or an agency would be. I'm going to go ahead and put in the chat if you want us to introduce you to the apartment search services that we work with, or what was the other thing, the tax attorney, things like that. You can fill out our questionnaire and we'll send those out to you likely tomorrow. Asia, I've been spending about 5.5 months per year in a Southwest French village for the last 14 years. I want to spend more time in France, but not be constrained by the 90 out of 180-day rule. But I also want to retain legal residency in the state where I am home based by making several visits a year. Is that possible with the VLST than applying for residency in France? So, unfortunately, no. If you're not spending more than 6 months per year in France, you should not be renewing your visa in France. I think this is something that people have been getting away with for the past 14 years or however many. I don't think people are getting away with it anymore. If you want to stay in France long term and build a life here, then you should get a renewable visa and make steps to establish France as the center of your economic interests and your home life and the place where you spend the majority of your time. If you want to maintain tax residence outside of France, then you need to limit the time that you're spending in France and make sure that the French tax office would not consider you to be a tax resident in France. You can theoretically get a temporary visa for anywhere from 4 to 11 months or 12, even 12 months in some situations, but then it's not renewable. So you could apply every year. Let's say you want to spend April through October every year. You could apply for a 6-month non-renewable visa every year and go back to the States in between and basically do that indefinitely, but never establish residence. That would be the main solution, but you would have to do the visa application over every year. Kevin says, thanks for making it so easy to download the new version of Foolproof French Visas for those of us who purchased the earlier edition. You're very welcome. It was always my intention to make sure that people would get the updates to the next edition. I would ask that if you take a look through it and you appreciate it, then please go and leave a review on the Amazon page because, again, that will help it to get in front of more people when it has positive reviews. Jessica, is it possible to book an extra transformation consultation or two in addition to the self-guided package? Yes. Yes, we can do additional consultations. What is the recommended timeline for settling in France? How long would it take on average until I've sorted out my residency and can start freelancing? Okay, so if you're freelancing, you're going for the Profession Libérale visa. Typically, they want you to start registering your company and working very quickly. This is another thing where people used to come and kind of get a little bit of leniency in terms of getting their business up and running. And now they really want to see that you have, contracts and things to start when you arrive and that you're going to be able to start working quickly, invoicing quickly, and that you're going to be getting your income up in the first year. They've been a lot less forgiving than they used to be in terms of looking at people's income. I've seen a lot of people where they applied for the Profession Libérale or started some type of business. They didn't really need the money from it, but they didn't want to stop working entirely. And then they just kind of focus on other French admin and getting settled and traveling and things like that. And then they get to the end of the year and they haven't made very much money at all. And it's really nerve-wracking to go in for the renewals. And I would say that if after a year or two, if you're not earning any money, they are not going to renew your visa. So, in terms of timeline, a lot of the prep work is going to be done before you even get to France. So, making sure that you have potential clients, that you've got your business plan approved, etc. And then when you arrive, you want to find housing as quickly as possible. We do recommend typically finding housing within the first month, maybe 6 weeks, and then waiting until you have that long-term address before you validate your visa, register your business activity, open your French bank account, and do all of the other admin things. Registering your business activity or self-employment activity is also going to start the process of getting you onto the French healthcare system. Typically, it takes a good 6 months after arrival to get everything set up. And then for our clients, we're sending out a reminder email for renewals 5 months before your visa is going to expire because it needs to be submitted 2 to 4 months before your visa expires. And so we send out the renewal basically after you've been in France for 7 months. So it goes by really fast. And there's a lot of stuff that you're going to have to do in that first 6 to 8 months to be ready. Zora, can transformation services help find long-term furnished rentals in Agen? We don't do rentals ourselves, but again, if you fill out our referral questionnaire, we are happy to introduce you to people that we know that are really good at advocating for you as a foreigner looking for a long-term lease in France. Tara, I'm a university professor and aim to spend my sabbatical year, August 2026, July 2027, in France with my family. We have no intention of renewing our visa. We have definite plans to return to the US at the end of this stay. Okay, so you go on to talk about a visitor visa or a temporary visa, but in this case, what you're actually going to want, well, there's a couple of different options. That would be an okay situation where you're getting a temporary or even a visitor visa and continuing to receive your salary because you're not actually working in France and you're going to be leaving. On the other hand, another option for you might be the researcher visa type. If you do want to do research, be affiliated with a university, work on something that you're going to publish later, something like that, and it can be good for you to have that connection, the ability to guest lecture or something. There's a researcher option available, and as long as if you're maintaining your salary from a US institution and you have an invitation letter from a French institution, typically those visa types are fairly straightforward to get. Cheryl, my husband will be retiring as a real estate agent, but he will be getting referral income for leads existing clients he passes on to another estate agency. So this is really a marginal case. I would say that to be safe, you want to count that as a business. Because even if you're just sending along the emails for referral income, I see more risk to trying to do that on a visitor visa, and I see more advantage into making sure that it's legitimately registered as a business and that the social taxes on it are paid in France. Also, you have to remember too that if you're set up in France as a self-employed person and you have some income and you're paying taxes on it, then that's getting you set up to do a multi-year card and a 10-year resident card and apply for naturalization and all of those good things. The thing that's a little bit tricky is if you have an entirely referrals-based business based outside of France, the thing that's going to be tricky is going to be showing that you're running that business in France. Because the thing that they look for when you're applying for the visa is, do you have a potential for clients and income from French sources? And so that's something that we always work on with people when they're putting together their business plan to make sure that the activity is developed enough. But I see a couple of potential ways you could go with that. In the US, you have a capital gains exclusion of $500,000 for a married couple if you have lived in the home for at least 2 out of the last 5 years. If we were to move to France, rent out our home for 2 years, then sell our house in 2 years, would we still be able to use the capital gains exclusion in the US? Is there a way to avoid paying French taxes without selling our house right away before moving to France? So this is something where you definitely need to talk to an accountant or a tax planner before you move. You could very well continue to meet the exemption in the US. I do not personally know, I'm not an accountant, so I don't know off the top of my head if renting out a property and turning it into a business would impact the ability to claim that capital gains exemption if it's only for 2 years. It can definitely impact taxes on the French side. And so you want to be very clear in the timeline and what happens if the house doesn't sell or if you rent it versus if you don't rent it, how long you've owned the property, things like that. You want to take all of that into consideration. In the previous webinars that we have done with accountants, typically the advice has been that if you sell your home within 1 year of moving to France, France isn't really interested. They consider that it's something that you started before you moved, before you became a French tax resident. On the other hand, yeah, you want to be careful and make sure that you know the timeline and the rules before you get the tax bill. Azita, does purchasing property in the south of France help with obtaining a French residency visa? If so, is there a minimum real estate investment amount required? No, owning property does not help in any way in terms of getting a visa or renewing a visa. It can slightly reduce the amount that they want to see in terms of financial resources. If you own a property outright and you're not paying rent, then you can consider that they'll be a little bit more lenient if you have slightly less cash in the bank or slightly less pension. But I don't have a formula for that. So it depends a little bit on their assessment. Do you offer services to assist with applying for a visa? Yes. So we have packages for entrepreneurs. So we typically work with people who are applying for Talent Passport Business Creator who are setting up companies in France. We work with a lot of people who are being self-employed, doing a profession libérale to be self-employed or micro-entrepreneur. We work with people who are the spouses of French or EU citizens. And so if one of you is an EU citizen and you're moving over as a family, if one of you is a French citizen and you're moving back to France but bringing a non-French partner, and then we can help with all of the visa or carte de séjour applications, all of the admin to get set up, especially if you've never lived in France before. We also work with visitors. So if you're retiring to France and you're not planning on working, we do have a visitor package for people. We do the visa application, we do the validation, we get you set up on the French healthcare, we exchange your driver's license, all of those things. If you would like a proposal from us for one of these packages, I will put the link in the chat to fill out a request for proposal. If you are applying for a business visa, I want to know what your business is and what your plan is generally before you sign any contract or proposal from us because I want to make sure that we're actually able to help you. So typically what we do in that case is you have a paid consultation with me. We talk through your timeline, your business, all of your questions, all of the things, and then I will apply the credit for the consultation fee. I will apply the consultation fee as a credit to the cost of the proposal. So if we do have a consultation beforehand, I want to get through all your questions, make sure that we are able to help, that I feel like it's a project that's going to get approved. We have a realistic timeline, all of that before you move. If you're a visitor, if you're the spouse of a French or an EU citizen, you can sign a proposal. I mean, you can do a consultation, a lot of people do, but I'm not as concerned if you have read the financial requirements and you're going to do what I ask, do what I recommend in terms of getting insurance, finding housing, things like that, then you don't have to have a consultation with me before you sign a contract. Lee, if I own properties in Europe but don't have a job, can I come on a retirement visa? Yes. Rental income is considered passive. Rental property or rental income is typically taxed in the country where the property is located. So you'll have to report it in France, but typically you're not going to be paying tax in France. Are there moving companies for France that charge per dimension, space of items and not weight? Pack We Ship is one, Send My Bag is one. I've been trying to get in touch with some of these shipping companies to try to get some quotes and some more information and try to be able to pass along some good recommendations to people. I've had a little bit of a hard time getting in touch with anybody since I'm not sending anything myself, but those are the two that are recommended most often. Okay, Deborah asked about the changes that go into effect. We did all that stuff at the beginning. Ingrid, if after I move to France, my parent dies, is any inheritance I receive taxed only by the US? Yes. So it's inheritance tax has to do with the tax residence of the person who is deceased. The tax treaty between France and the US, or France and any other country, will cover what country gets to tax what. For people who are in the US, if you're receiving an inheritance from someone in the US, typically that's not going to be taxed. But if somebody dies in France, then French tax law may apply. And that's where you need to talk to a tax attorney or an international estate planner so that you can understand, based on how long you've been living in France and where your assets are and who your heirs might be, how is that going to impact your estate? Is the French test all written questions or is there an oral part of the exam? For the higher levels, there is a speaking part where they evaluate you speaking. One person evaluates you in person and they record it. At least this is how it was when I did it. That was 15 years ago. And then somebody else, another grader, will listen to the recording later. I believe on all of the tests, there's going to be a listening comprehension component, but I'm not sure that there's a speaking component. Bill, is it okay to have rental income in France, perhaps from a gîte, or rental income from a house in the US when I have a long stay visitor visa that states I will not work in France? Yes. So rental income is typically considered passive and it doesn't cause a problem for being on a visitor visa. Obviously, if your property is not in France, then that income is going to get taxed in the country where the property is located. As I said, if the property is in France, that income is going to be taxable in France. Now, this is another thing that is a pending change, and I hesitate to say too much about it because I'm very likely to get some of these details wrong because there have been so many different versions of this floating around that I'm actually not sure like what the current situation is. I will tell you that up until the most recent budget, basically under 23,000 was considered LMNP, location meublée non professionnelle, and typically that was considered passive. And so if you weren't like providing a comprehensive gîte service, like you're going to change the sheets every day and you're serving breakfast and all of that, like typically that would be considered passive income. And so it wouldn't be a problem if you had like 10,000 euros in income from a gîte in France on a visitor visa. However, the threshold for income reporting types for gîtes and short-term furnished rentals is changing. There is a significant backlash against Airbnb and all of these companies. Now, up until now, it's mainly been the larger cities that have been able to regulate the gîtes. But in the new budget, the income threshold for basically having to do full accounting has dropped. So now if you're a classified gîte and you're registered with a tourism agency or something, you're going to be able to continue to have income up to the micro entrepreneur threshold. But now, instead of the goods and merchandise threshold of 188,000, your new threshold is 77,000. Previously, the LMNP threshold was 23,000. I'm not sure where it's going to drop to now. If you're not a classified gîte, and this would very likely include all non-professional furnished rentals, your threshold is dropping from 23,000 to 15,000. So basically, more complicated accounting, lower threshold for being considered a business. Remember that if you have a gîte and you want to be considered a business because you want to be on a profession libérale and earning more than 3 years at minimum wage so that you can eventually apply for naturalization, you need to make more than 23,000 euros per year anyway, because that's 1 year of minimum wage is going to be about 23,000 euros. Shannon, what specific areas, prefectures of Southwest France are you seeing the most inquiries, areas where people retire, where are people actually moving to? So we have a good number of clients in the Montpellier Carcassonne area. We have a couple of clients in Bordeaux, Toulouse, Agen, Cahors. But I would say our biggest areas, we have about a third of our clients in Paris. We have about a third in Nice. We have maybe 20% in Carcassonne, Montpellier, between like in the Aude and the Occitanie area and the Hérault. And then the rest, like kind of all over France. I will say that Americans typically you're going to go to Montpellier or Carcassonne. There's a lot of British in the Dordogne. We have, I think, two clients in the Dordogne in the different Beaux Villages de France. We have one couple in Bergerac. We have a couple in the Périgord. No, we do have a third couple in Sarlat, also in the Dordogne. So we have a few, but it tends to be more British. So it really depends on like, do you want small city or do you want like country kind of middle of nowhere? Okay, so Kimberly H says that there is a speaking section in the Delph A2. Tonya, what is the actual process for applying for a student visa? Okay, so again, you're going to want to refer to foolproof French visas to understand like where can you find programs that are eligible, what should you be looking for, what are your options after your student visa because you'll need to switch to another visa type in order to stay in France long term. And it talks through the different types of programs and the process for each type. But basically, you're going to first apply for and get accepted by your program. There's two ways to do that. One is you apply through the Campus France portal. It might already be too late for next year. The other option is to apply directly to the program, get accepted to the program, and then submit all of your application documents through the Campus France portal. This is if you're in the US or another country that uses Campus France. Not all countries do. Once you get approval from a program, you submit everything to Campus France. You're going to submit an application, tell them why you want to study in France. You're going to pay a fee. They're going to review your documents and set up an interview. They're going to talk about why do you want to move to France? Why are you learning French? Why did you pick the program that you want? And you want to talk about like your academic and professional reasons for whatever program that you pick. Once you get approval from that, then you're going to apply for your student visa through your local TLS or VFS agency, TLS now in the US. And in that case, you are going to apply no more than 90 days before the start of your program. So it's a three-step process: program, Campus France, visa. Can a student visa be extended depending on one's program? Yes. If a program is more than 1 year, the visa can be renewed until the program is complete. Now, this is where you want to pay attention to your options in foolproof French visas because if you want to stay in France longer term, you're going to have to, one, pick a program that gives you a better chance of being able to do that, and two, potentially pick a program that will give you job options. So if you do 2 years of higher education in France, typically you're going to, and you get a degree from a French university, typically you're going to be able to apply for a visa type called Recherche d'emploi création d'entreprise. It is a 1 year status or a 1 year carte de séjour, which is not renewable. And you can use that time to either find a job or set up as self-employed. At the end of that year, you have to change your status to something else. And depending on what type of program you do, you want to take a look at what the job opportunities are going to be. Do people get good internships? Are you going to be able to get a salary that's high enough to get hired by a French company after your studies? Front, I'm considering buying a second home in Bergerac and living there 90 days a year before making a permanent move. What are my tax implications for this time period? I will only be considered a visitor, but I will also be a property owner. Do the tax implications change if I stay for 6 months instead? So if you're only going as a visitor, as a tourist, you're respecting the 90 out of 180-day rule. The main tax implication is going to be that you'll have to pay your taxe foncière as a property owner, and you'll have to pay the taxe sur les résidences secondaires as a second homeowner. This is replacing what used to be the taxe d'habitation on all lodging, basically. Do check the rate for the taxe sur les résidences secondaires in your area where you're looking because it has gone up a lot in a lot of different areas all over France in the past couple of years. Because now so few people are paying, or nobody's paying the taxe d'habitation anymore. If you are spending 6 months a year, especially if you get a visa that's renewable, then you have to start looking at, does it look like I'm making France the center of my my economic interests? Is it the place where I'm spending most of my time? So you do need to be a little bit careful in terms of especially if you get a renewable visa, at what point do you become a tax resident? If you're only going for 90 days at a time, you're not going for a long consecutive stay, you're not getting a renewable visa, then it's not really going to be an issue. Sherry, is there some way to get a complete understanding of the tax situation for a U.S. retiree living in France? Yeah, I mean, the best way is to consult with a tax attorney or an accountant before you move to France to understand exactly how you will be impacted, not only in terms of income taxes, but also in terms of, like I said, estate planning, financial planning, those types of things. Oh, this was the question. Does PUMA tax provide a foreign tax credit on the U.S. tax return? No. If you mainly have pension and IRA distribution, you're not going to pay French tax because those are not Social Security, 401k, IRA, anything pension is not going to be subject to the PUMA contribution and it's not going to be subject to income tax in France. Jerry, it looks like the visa application process is well documented in the book. Is there something similar for everything that needs to be done arriving in France? Renting a home, insurance, buying a car, etc. Yes, so we have two things. One is the French Admin Tracker, which is a book that I put together, which outlines and has space for tracking all of the different admin stuff that you need to do. Let me get a link to that from Amazon. So that has space for all of the things from finding an apartment and getting utilities set up, getting bank accounts set up, car insurance, all of that kind of stuff. Obviously, for our clients, we do a lot of those things. And then we also have in our program, Fast Track to France, we track through all the things that you need to know before and during your move. If you are already in France and you've started doing the admin things, but you're not sure if you have gotten everything, if you think you might be missing something, if you're set up correctly for renewing your visa, all of that, I put together a survey or an assessment called the French Relocation Admin Success Survey, which basically it's about 100 questions, mostly multiple choice, where you're going to answer questions about, do you have a permanent address? Did you validate your visa? Do you have utility bills in your name? Do you have a French phone number? Did you set up this account? Did you set up that account? Do all kinds of different things. And it's going to then tell you at the end, okay, these are the things you did really good. This is what you still need to do. This is what we might be able to help you with. These are referrals that you might need for a tax attorney, an accountant, a French bank, etc. So that can be a really helpful tool if you're not sure and you want like a comprehensive, personalized list of the stuff that you need to do. Jacqueline, do you see major restrictions and laws for participation by immigrant retirees in the French healthcare system? No, I think there'll be a fee. I think it will be reasonable. The whole principle of the French healthcare system is that it's universal and that people who live in France are eligible to participate without restriction. So, yeah, I don't see that being called into question. I do think they're going to take a look at people who obviously have the means to contribute to the system, but for whatever reason, like they're not being charged. So, people, for example, with really high pensions. I think generally people in the US or people from the US with 401k and Social Security, you can have pretty substantial pensions that would far exceed what a French person would have. And so, yeah, I can see that being put into place. What is the long-term apartment rental market like in the greater Paris area, and are there certain arrondissements or suburbs that are reputed to have better supply? No. Apartments in France, especially in Paris, are a total nightmare. There is no place with good supply where it is easy. So that's why we work with people who help our clients find apartments because you don't pick the apartment picks you, and you put your name in, and you need somebody to advocate for you in most cases. Christine, what is the required minimum income per month? So it's going to be 1,823 euros gross. That's if you're self-employed, you need to earn at least minimum wage. The net amount for that is going to be 1,435. And that's going to be the amount that you're going to need. One, in savings, if you are applying for a profession libérale, if you're applying for a visitor visa and you need to show passive income or cash available, it's 1443 euros and 41 cents per month. So 17,321 euros per year. I'm on Social Security and earn $1,700 per month. Can I reside in Paris with that amount? I don't know that you can find a place to rent in Paris for that amount. I think you'd be better off in a slightly smaller city where you can get a small studio, but small studios, there's a lot of competition because that's what all the students live in. And they're looking at students have their two French students have both of their parents and all of their parents' documents be to serve as a guarantee for them. So there's a lot of tough competition for studios. And also, just generally, it's hard to find somebody to help you find an apartment for rent below that because, in order for them to make their money back for the time that they're investing, it's really hard to work with low budgets because there's a lot of competition. It's a lot harder to get you a place, and they charge based on a percentage of rent. So, there's that to consider too. MC, what documents have to be translated for the visa application or renewal and what has to be submitted with each one? So there's a full list of all the documents for each different types of visas in foolproof French visas. There's a list of documents for the initial application and for the renewal. Typically, for the initial application, you're not going to need documents in French. I will say that even though they will accept things like business plans and stuff in English, I have found that things get processed slightly faster if they're in French in terms of getting approvals and things like that. So, as a matter of policy, we switch to doing everything in French all the time. Typically, for the initial application, no need for certified translations, no need for apostille. They're going to only take photocopies, so you only need maybe one or two copies of different documents. For renewals, you're potentially going to need translations. How do we get French bank accounts before we move to France so that our money has an account to be deposited into before arrival? So unless you own property, and if you own property in France, you're likely going to be able to open a non-resident bank account. If you don't own property in France, you're not going to be able to open an account until you arrive in France. And you don't need a bank account in France before you arrive, unless you're applying for a profession libérale visa, which is the new annoying thing that I think there's a question about in a minute. Lori, what is it really like trying to find doctors? I'm reading mixed messages in expat forums. I'm assuming it will depend on where we live, our level of French, etc. Yeah, I mean, it really depends a lot, and it's really hard to say. I'm outside of Paris. I've never had a problem finding a doctor, getting an appointment within a couple of days. In other areas, it can be different. I would say that you want to ask in a lot of these groups for referrals. The other thing too is that it's really hard to tell where it's going to be difficult because in some places like you'll see that there's a lot of doctors available, but none of them are taking new patients. So like in Nice, for example, there's an aging population. A lot of retired people live down there, including retired French people, and the population of doctors is older. And so a lot of times like it's hard to find a new doctor. And this is where, networking and talking to people can help a lot. It's really something that's quite difficult to figure out before you go. And I think that unless you have like a condition where you really require a particular kind of specialist, for most people, I would say you don't need to be making decisions on where to live based on doctors. I have your book. I read your book and I recommended it to several others. It's great. I've never thought I'd meet anyone as detailed as myself. Thank you. My question is when you mentioned several times not to even think about changing visa types, is that solely within a mid-visa period? So the main thing is that you can't be on a specific timeline because when you try to change visa types, it takes as long as it takes. And so the problem is, first of all, that you always need to renew the visa that you come on at least once. Otherwise, they tend to think that you're trying to change statuses, like you didn't apply for the right visa in the first place, and that you were trying to like get your foot in the door, that you came on a visitor visa meaning to work, but you weren't applying for the right visa. They think that in some cases they can look at it as a little bit deceptive. If you come and you renew your visa and then after 2 or 3 years or whatever, you want to change your status, theoretically it's possible. It really depends on your prefecture, like how long it takes. It really needs to be something that you prepare far in advance. And it's always going to take probably 2 to 3 times as long as you think it's going to take. We have clients that we started working with them in February of last year. And by the time they've gotten all their documents together, I thought it was going to be a relatively straightforward process because they do already have a solid business idea. And I was hoping to get it done before the summer. We're still waiting to get it in. And of course, in the meantime, then there's this implementation of this pre-approval process for businesses. So now we have to add another step, which we're not sure how long it's going to take yet. No, I moved to Nice in November because I got a lease with an American woman and had already been here in the spring. How does one move without a car, two roller bags, a backpack, and a bike? I think that you either have to rent a car or find a friend or hire somebody. It's really hard to say how to move that stuff without a car. I mean, that would be kind of an issue in any city or any place that you might want to live. Angelica, if I need to go back to the States for an uncertain extended period of time and not renew my 1 year long stay visa, which is my first, when and if I'm ready to return, will it be easier or is it the same process and cost all over again? So if you don't renew your visa and you let it expire and you've moved back to the States, then it's basically starting all over again. The only difference is that when you're applying for your visa, obviously you want to say that you previously lived in France for more than 3 months. The other thing too is if you went through the whole process of getting on the French healthcare system and you got your attestation des droits or you got your carte vitale, you do want to send your carte vitale back in and tell them that you left France. But then on the other hand, you're already set up in the system. So if you do come back in a year or two, like your social security number already exists. So once you send in your documents, it's going to be a lot faster for them to look you up in the system and get your card issued to you. Okay, Robert asked about health insurance changes and the civic rule changes. We talked about that at the beginning. Jimmy asked about changes for 2026. Again, went through that at the beginning. ETS. Okay, so this is a section in foolproof French visas that we can get into a little bit. So there are two things. There's the EES, the entry exit system, and ETS, the electronic travel information and authorization system. Now, EES is already implemented since October, and this is where when you enter and exit the EU, you are being scanned for biometrics, and I think they're taking a picture of you and they're scanning your passport to keep track of your days in and out of Schengen as you enter and exit. So they should be able to track people who are overstaying or who are basically violating the 90 out of 180-day rule. This has already been implemented in a lot of places. It's not totally rolled out yet to every single airport or entry point into the EU, but it's going to be this year. I used to tell people not to worry too much if they overstayed a little bit accidentally, to just go back, fly directly out of France, do not pass go, do not collect $200, just get out, apply for your visa, come back. If you're apologetic at the border, in most cases, they were being forgiving. I no longer maintain that position. The place where I think this is going to cause the most problems is for people who are in the process of renewing a carte de séjour who do not yet have it. Again, I used to tell people, like, okay, well, if you renewed it and you have the paperwork that it's been submitted, but it hasn't been approved yet or it hasn't been issued yet, don't worry so much about traveling back and forth. But unfortunately, I think there's a much higher likelihood now of having issues at the border if you don't have up-to-date documentation. And there's been delays. We have a section in Foolproof French visas about the delays that people are experiencing with renewals and the problems that that's causing for a lot of paperwork for people. It's just a fact of life right now that renewals take as long as they take. There's no way to. I had one last year that took 359 days from submitting the renewal 4 months, 4 months minus 2 or 3 days before the expiration date on the carte de séjour to getting an approval. It takes as long as it takes. That's just the way it is. Again, I used to advise that it probably wouldn't be an issue at the border. I still don't really think that people are going to have problems, especially if they're American or a nationality where you can travel in and out of the EU on just a passport. But I would be really careful. I would be really careful, especially if you don't have up-to-date documents. ETS, on the other hand, is the pre-authorization. So for somebody who is visiting the EU, who does not reside here, basically it's just putting in your personal information, having Interpol scan the system to make sure that you're not like an international wanted felon. My understanding was that it was going to cost about 20 euros for 3 years, up from I think initially it was going to be 7, and the price of the ESTA and the UK's ETA went up, so the EU raised their rates as well. It needs to be done in advance to make sure that you can board the flight, but is not overall going to be very difficult or onerous. We don't have an implementation date for that yet. It's been pushed back every year, multiple times since COVID. That's going to be another place where it's going to be a little bit sticky in the beginning because technically, if you have a residence permit for an EU country, you do not have to get an ETS. But if you have a residence permit that is being renewed, but it hasn't been renewed yet, but it's been submitted, can you get an ETS? Can you continue to travel in and out without it? I don't know. And so I outlined those issues a little bit in foolproof French visas, and it's something that we're going to have to monitor and understand, and that probably honestly will not be applied uniformly across the EU at the border. So it might depend on, are you going through France? Are you going through Italy? Are you going through Germany? It's hard to say. All right, we are way over time. I still have two full pages of questions. I'm going to pick out a couple, but I'm going to have to go because we've been on here for more than an hour. So some of these we can save for next time. John, are furnished or semi-furnished apartments available for sale in Paris? Typically, places are sold unfurnished, depending on what you buy and what the furnishing is. You can negotiate to have furnishings included in the purchase, so it really depends. If you would like me to put you in touch with a buyer's agent, I can do that. If you would like to consider working with us on your relocation to France, typically you want to get started about 3 to 4 months in advance if you are retired or a family member of an EU citizen. You want to get started at least 6 to 8 months in advance if you are self-employed, starting a business, etc. And so you can fill out a request for a proposal there. A lot of these are duplicates, guys. So I know I said I had 2 pages of questions yet, but a lot of them are similar, like what are the updates, what are the requirements of different visas, etc. Richard asked, with a long stay visa, can I participate in volunteer work or create some kind of independent internship? So an internship is not going to be possible because to be an intern, you have to be enrolled in an academic program and get academic credit for it. And you also have to be paid if it's more than 309 hours. So that's not going to be doable, but any type of volunteer work for an association, things like that, etc., is going to be possible. Chanel, if I have an application for a business visa in another EU country, what would happen if I apply for this French visa? I mean, which country do you want to move to? I don't know that submitting 2 applications to 2 different EU countries for a long-term business visa is going to impact each other. I think it might for tourism if you were from a country like, I don't know, Mongolia, where you had to apply for a tourist visa to travel to France. It could very well be impacted, but yeah, eventually you can only pick one because you can only live in one place. But in terms of applying, if you have a strong case for both, I don't see why not. Okay, there's a question about the business plan approval for NF. So I'm going to end on that one, which is currently the bane of my existence and that of other professionals that I network with. So a couple of things about the NF procedure. They have no idea what they're doing. They don't know what they're looking for. They don't understand the business type of auto entrepreneur. They don't understand profession libérale and that you're not making an investment and putting together statutes for setting up a company. They don't understand that you don't need like permission from your landlord to register your micro entrepreneur activity to a place where you have your primary residence. They don't know what they're looking for. I really think that it is people who have been hired as contract employees without college degrees, who are not trained in anything, who are using an AI. And I don't know how they're going to fix it. So I know that it's very frustrating to everyone. I was playing ping pong on several files, and then we ended up getting those applications through the consulate and getting those visas approved before, without the DREET's approval. That's no longer the case. Now they are coming back and asking for it. So there are a couple of things. One is for the address, you want a domiciliation service. Typically, these are going to be in the 15 to 30 euros a month range. It's a professional address. It can be a good idea to use that address anyway, because then if you move, you can register your business as soon as you arrive in France without having to wait to find your long-term address. And you can also keep using that address if you move. So it's a monthly fee, but it can be a really good solution. For the bank account, I'm working on a couple of different solutions. We have clients who already own property in France, and so for them, they already had a French bank account. It was really straightforward. I've been going back and forth with them because obviously, if you do not live in France, then it is basically not possible to open a French bank account if you don't own property. It's also against EU regulations for them to require specifically a French bank account and not an EU bank account. So that makes no sense. And yeah, they don't get it. They don't get it. So BNP can be a good solution. It's long. We had started working with BNP a couple years ago and trying to refer clients to set up bank accounts. I want to say it was like 3 years ago, and we were talking to the guy, and he was really enthusiastic, and he was like, "Oh yeah, it takes about 2 weeks to set up a non-resident account." 2 months later, it still wasn't done. And BNP's thing is that they have to have wet signatures, so they have to DHL you the paperwork to sign in the US, and you have to DHL it back, and it's a whole thing. Not my favorite solution, takes a long time. I think I have two solutions that will work. If you want me to send you an introduction to the currency exchange broker that I work with, they have said they can get a French IBAN. I'm hoping that a currency statement with a French IBAN will be sufficient. Barring that, I have a meeting on Thursday with the bank that we usually work with, where when our clients arrive in France, to talk about, is there a way we can use the business address, like the domiciliation address, and set up part of the business or something to get enough economic ties to France to enable them to set up an account for somebody who's not in France with a visa yet. So I've reached out to several people who do similar work to what I do. Nobody seems to have figured this out yet. I don't know. There were like one or two people, but I think it was similar to clients that we have where they already own property. They were able to prove they own the property. They were able to prove they own the bank account. So I'm working on it. I tried to get in all my visa applications under the wire before they started actually implementing the procedure, but unfortunately, I did get somebody stuck in French consulate limbo. So I'm trying to work with her to resolve the situation as quickly as possible. The other thing is, too, is that I don't know how long it takes because we haven't had a response yet. We've had some that, like, they've responded in 2 days to say request more documents. Some they've taken 2 weeks to look at. And these are also, I think they're by department too. So if you submit and you're going to be living in Lyon, it's different from if you're going to be living in Nice or Paris or wherever. So yeah, I don't have a good solution yet. I am trying as fast as possible to get one. When I do get one, it will be updated in the Complete French Business Incubator, which is our program for people who want help putting together their business plan to apply for visas. Obviously, for our clients, we're in spaghetti mode. We're throwing spaghetti at the wall. We're trying a bunch of different solutions. I have 3 or 4 that are in the works, and whichever one works will be the one that we go with. These things have a tendency to not continue to work. So we've had several solutions throughout the years of trying to set up bank accounts for people before they arrive. They used to require it for the talent card applicants, and then they stopped requiring it. And basically, I had this 2-page letter that I would send to the consulate every time, like, look, these are all the different things that we tried. No bank wants to open bank accounts for these people who don't yet live in France and don't have an address here. So that worked for a while. Then they stopped requiring the bank account, and now we're back to square one. And I suspect that different options are going to be successful in different places. And also, we could start doing it with a bank, and then the bank decides, no, we actually think it's too risky to open accounts for people who aren't in France yet. We're going to stop approving those. And so then that bank won't do the accounts anymore, and then we have to find another solution. So ask the question again next month. Maybe I'll have a better answer for you. But yeah, this is just one of those things that is terrible. Thanks for attending for so long. We are way over time. I didn't even get through all the questions, but again, I really appreciate everybody coming. I'm going to give you the link again to the 2026 edition of Foolproof French Visas. It's about 17 pages longer than it was last year. This recording will be going up on YouTube later this week. I don't know exactly when. Please do go and review the book on Amazon if you have read it, if you've liked it. Share it with your friends. And let me give you the link for consultations as well if you would like to book a 1-hour consultation with me to go through all of your questions. If I didn't get to them today, If you want to talk through all your questions, your timeline, your business idea, etc., you can book a consultation with me. I'm almost booked up for January. But if you made it your New Year's resolution to move to France in 2026, let's make it happen. So thank you so much. If you didn't get your question answered, I'm sorry. Please submit it for our next time, and hopefully we'll be able to get through everything. All right. Have a good rest of your day, and I will see you later. Take care.